Brandon Carlisle here with Tough Enough Movement. Today I have the pleasure of having Nick Shaw, who's a bodybuilder, powerlifter, founder and owner of Renaissance Periodization, also known as RP Strength, author of Fit for Success, host of RP Podcast, and all kinds of things like that. So we'll just start kind of in the beginning of, so you're in Michigan, born and raised, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know if everyone can see the videos, but behind me in my bookcase, I've got a Michigan football helmet and Michigan National Championship football behind me. So, born and raised in the great state of Michigan, and lived there until I was done with college, and then I moved out to New York. Now I'm in North Carolina. But yeah, always loyal to the Maize and Blue.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be loyal to your local teams. You know, I'm loyal to U of U. We have some rough seasons, but that's my team. So
Pretty good
we'll
now,
never get to the
though.
Michigan. They're pretty good now. They've been pretty good for about 20 years now. But
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
so you grew up there. You said blue collar family, youngest of was it three siblings? Or
Yeah. So I grew up in just rural, small town Michigan, somewhere about directly halfway in between Detroit and Chicago. So not too far from like the Indiana, Michigan border. Man, the town I grew up in is like 2,000, 2,500 people, about 100 people in my graduating high school class. Yeah, I was the youngest. So my sister's about 7 years older than me. My brother is 4 years older than myself.
yeah. So growing up, how was all that? Did you love living in a small town, or was it kind of like you wanted to get out into a big city? Or
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I see people kind of ask that all the time. Small town, big city. Probably more big city, I guess, because I lived in New York City for something like 6 years, and then I lived down here in like the suburbs of Charlotte, and I love it. There's always a lot of stuff to do, and just the ease and access of getting this stuff, I probably enjoy the most. Like there's, good gyms, good food. You don't have to drive, 30, 40 minutes and go to a grocery store. Like there's a grocery store 5 minutes from where I live. It's amazing. Not that many people go to it. So I'm definitely more in that probably bigger city, suburbs kind of thing.
okay. So as you were growing up, um, so I when I was listening to things and reading your books, you said you did track and like long distance running.
Yeah, most people don't believe that when they look at me now, but yeah, I was quite a bit smaller then. But here's the thing, I loved lifting and I got into running and basically I just liked working out, right? That was really the moral of the story here. But I was always, when it come to running cross country, I mean, everyone's just a stick figure out there. And then here comes me, this guy that could bench, 225 in high school or whatever, which, like where I was from, that was a decent accomplishment. And so I was probably 20, 30 pounds heavier than like everyone else, but just loved to train, loved to work out. And like that's really kind of where fitness for me got started. And I figured out that wasn't very gifted athletically, but the one maybe gift that I had, if I had to look back and think about it, was like I hard worker and sort of owe that to my parents. My dad, super blue collar guy, probably the hardest working person I've ever met. And I guess that was just ingrained in me, probably just genetics, I suppose. Well, and good environment, just seeing that growing up. But yeah, that's what literally got me started in the fitness journey.
Yeah, and just like you said, that blue collar mentality of work hard, push through is kind of it comes down from your parents, and it's a great thing to have. And I feel because I grew up blue collar as well, and that's just something you do and you're taught at a young age is like you work through things, you push and you put in the hours, and then that's where you get the successes from pushing and doing that.
Totally. Yep.
And so you were saying that in your I think freshman year you weren't on the varsity. There was nine people. There were
Yeah.
seven varsity, and you were on. Some people. I want to know your mindset of coming back and doing the 100 miles running throughout that summer. Is it kind of like that Michael Jordan thing? Like, I wasn't quite there. I need to push it because some people were like, "Oh shit," and then they quit. Or is it like in your family, we don't quit? Like, what was the push to keep going?
It's more of being goal oriented and focused. Because I didn't like think that I was going to be a good cross country runner. Like it's just something that I did because my parents told me. I remember that straight up. They're like, "You're doing a fall sport. doesn't matter what it is, you have three choices, right? Because there's not a ton of choices where I grew up. It was cross country, it was golf, or it was football. Now, football is an interesting one because at least would have been fairly interesting to me, but our team sucked. Like they were terrible. And so it was never really something that I considered. I'm like, no, I'm not going to go do that. Like if they were good, maybe, right? Because then you grow up watching it and all that, but that was not the case. So yeah, just environment and luck led me down to the running thing, but I like track more, and I thought that I could be pretty good at it because like I was pretty good my eighth grade year in that, but not so great at the long distance stuff. And so the coach said, "Hey, do this over the summer between freshman year and sophomore year when freshman track ended and sophomore cross country season would begin. It's like, hey, you're supposed to run 100 miles." So I hear that, and why wouldn't I do it, right? The coach said to do that. So, okay, duh. I started doing it. I started logging every single mile that I ran. And then the first day of sophomore season of cross country, the very first day of fall practice, I'm up there running with the top couple guys from the year before. Now they eventually got ahead of me because like they basically didn't train as much as I did over the summer. Once they did, they got back ahead of me. But yeah, I was like top five then after that. So it was this early light bulb thing that said to me, all right, Shaw, you're not the most physically gifted person in the world. Let's accept that. But man, I can train my ass off and I can do that. Most people aren't willing to do that. Hey, and hey, I kind of like it. I like being good. I don't want to just be some schlub. Like I wanted to be good. I always had goals to set some records at my school. And I did not ultimately achieve that. It still kind of eats at me to this day, but I was very, very close on a couple different occasions. But like that was just always my mindset. It was never a mindset of, oh, I just want to do this just to do it. I don't know, man. That's just never been a part of my psyche. Like if I'm going to do something, I want to be good at it. I don't want to just be average. Fuck that.
Yeah. Yeah, you get that drive. This isn't, if I'm putting in effort to it, I want to make sure I can succeed. I can do well. And I think
Totally.
having the mindset of liking to train and to be coachable is a hard thing to come by too,
Oh,
of like
yeah.
liking to push yourself and liking, because it's like some people like the lights of, hey, we're doing good, we're winning, they get the recognition, but they don't
Mhm.
like to put the hours in. Like me personally, I love to put those hours in and push myself outside of the sport. Well,
I, yeah, that's the whole, do you like the journey or the destination more? I almost certainly like the journey more than I do. Yeah, I've competed in bodybuilding a couple of times. And like, don't get me wrong, it's a nice experience, but that's not really why I do it. I just love training. So, yeah, if you have a goal and you have something to shoot for and you get that cool outcome at the end, awesome. But even if that wasn't the case, I'd still be training. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
that's how, again, I don't know. I don't think everyone's wired like that for sure, but luckily I have been and I love it. I thrive off of it.
Yeah. And so when you were going through school and playing your sports and any of that, was there anything you struggled with throughout that? Like, was school hard for you, or was anything like that just anything difficult, or was it all pretty simple?
High school was not hard for me. I did very little homework and got almost a 4.0. Um, we only had two AP classes at the school, so I took them both, got college credits for both, when I did well on the AP tests. I never really had to push myself. And then I went to college at the University of Michigan, which is a pretty good school. And I don't want to say that was a total rude awakening, but I was definitely not an elite caliber student at Michigan, to put it lightly. I want to say I graduated with like a 3.3 or 3.4 GPA, I think.
Yeah.
But I will say, so freshman and sophomore years, when you're taking all like the kind of general courses and all that, I didn't do as well. Like I remember really struggling to pull like a C in econ because it just wasn't my jam. I just didn't get it. Accounting, I got like a B or a B minus. Like luckily one day before the final, it like started to click and I did okay. Otherwise, I was definitely going for like a C in that class. But it was once I got into junior and senior year and I started taking courses in like the sports fields, like things that I actually liked and enjoyed, I did much better and it was like basically a straight A student. So don't know what there's to maybe draw from that other than I don't know, I wasn't interested in some of the stuff. I'm not sure, but I don't think I really had those good work habits and that work ethic to set myself up to know how to study and be productive. Because yeah, freshman, sophomore, year, and like I did okay, but um definitely was not prepared to compete with a lot of the other kids. If like, all the other people that I'm meeting, they're all from suburbs of Detroit or bigger cities, New York, things like that. And, they had all these advanced classes. I just never had that. So, I sort of breezed through high school and was like, yeah, I'm good. But, then it's like you go to that next level, right? It'd be like going from high school sports to college sports, kind of the same thing. Well, if you don't, you can only skate by on genetics so far in sports. It's like, oh, now everyone's good. What do we have to separate ourselves here now?
Yeah. Yeah. And same thing with high school. It's like for me, high school was super simple. Like when I have like my brother struggled with it and like barely graduated and everything like that, I'm like, how? Like high school's the easiest thing in the world. And then but going to college is a different level. Same thing with athletics. Like going from high school football to college football, you look around and go, when you're in high school football, even when you can put if you can push yourself and you can drive, like you can be competitive. And
Mhm.
then once you get to college, it's like, no, everybody here has that push. Everybody
Yeah,
has that drive. It's a
you hope
level
so.
playing
Yeah, yeah.
field. You have to stand out. But and then so you're saying that it was easier later. Do you think it's more just because if you like a subject, you're more of a sponge where you can soak it up, and the other ones just you're like, this is boring. It's hard to stay focused in it.
Probably, yeah, probably a good combination of that. And the other stuff was just a little out of my league. I just it didn't click with me.
Yeah.
I did okay, but just the things that really drew my interest, yeah, I was much more in tune with it, and I was like, all right, this is awesome. I'm probably listening more, probably again, I always showed up at classes, 95% of the time, something like that. So I wasn't skipping stuff or anything like that. But yeah, you just get into the stuff you really like started getting into more, classes around because my degree was in sport management, but I was in the kinesiology school. So anytime I had a class, and somewhat involved in kinesiology, I loved it, or at least didn't hate it. Let's go with that second part. Didn't hate
Yeah.
it. Maybe didn't love every single one, but yeah, it's much easier to keep my interest, keep my focus. I'm in an econ class at 8 in the morning. A couple of days, I remember that my sophomore year. Yeah, sometimes you can barely stay awake. I'm like, what the hell am I learning here? I don't know.
Yeah. So when you went into college, you were going to be originally planned on being an athletic director. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes,
What was
yeah,
what was
totally.
your drive there for that?
I love sports. I love sports growing up. I was a big sports fan, watched a lot of basketball, watched a lot of football. Of course, was a huge Michigan football fan. So just kind of had a goal like, yeah, Michigan's always, it's the only school I was going to go to. I think I technically applied to another like small school in Michigan, but it was Michigan or bust for me. So like it was always a goal, went there. Um, Sophomore year, I got kind of lucky. I don't know if it's luck or whatever, but met with my like academic counselor and was like, hey, I'd really like to do something with the football team, like something sports related. And she had a connection, and I volunteered for 2 years working on like Michigan football recruiting. So I would like go down to Schembechler Hall and basically stuff envelopes that they would send out to recruits and stuff like that. I got to be on the field a little bit during games, which was really, really awesome. And because I was a hard worker and always kind of showed up. It was asked me my senior year. They asked if I wanted a paid job at Michigan football. Hell yes! Like who's going to say no to that? Whatever, making like $8 an hour. But I got to work in the video department, so like I got to film all the practices, got to film all the games, got to go on a couple trips with the team. So like to me, this is the greatest thing in the world. I couldn't imagine anything better than that. So it was, I don't know, I guess moral of the story is like I've always had goals, and through some combination of hard work and showing up and probably a little bit of luck in there too, of course, I've been pretty fortunate to reach a lot of those goals.
Yeah. No, having that goal and that idea of where you want to go is a way to put your plan in action and keep the steps of instead of going, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. I don't know. I'll take generals and figure it out. It's a lot harder to get to a certain point.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm still figuring that out now. And like RP and work processes, like, well, actually, when you're very focused on one or two main things, it becomes a lot easier versus, trying to do 6, 8, 10 things. So then you end up doing 6, 8, 10 things not so well when you should probably just work on being like world class at one or two. So it's one of those things you kind of learn over time, but I don't know. So draw some elements of things you learn over time. But yeah, a lot of people just need reminders.
Yeah. What would be your outtake on like some people say work on your weaknesses and some people are like no, kind of like you're saying be a master at your craft and everything like that. Do you think more put your skills to work and if there is a weakness you need to work on, or is it like no, you need to put more focus on your weakness?
Very good question. Here's what I think. I think you should probably more likely, this is just my opinion, this is my take on it, probably double down on your strengths. So there's some stuff that I really suck at RP, like sometimes really like attention detail oriented stuff or like accounting or whatever. It's not my strong suit. So recently I've turned all that over to other people at RP, and it's like, what are the couple things that I'm pretty good at? Well, like one of them, and hopefully people listening to this will agree. It's like I can probably be a little more forward facing and go chat with a bunch of people and get on different podcasts and go network and meet people and do all this stuff. Like that's probably a great use of my time. Awesome. Should I be doing backside accounting stuff? Almost certainly not, because I suck at that. Remember, I got a B- in college. I barely passed. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really good question, man. And I think like, man, there's like so much nuance to that too, because when let's say you're just starting out in a business, like you have to be at least adequate at your weaknesses because you might not actually get off the ground and get running if you're so inadequate in some area. But can you realize that and outsource it and bring someone in to help? Because then if you can do that and you get other people to that are, let's say, very talented at one skill, bring them in to do that thing. And then you're probably going to have more free time to do the things that you're really good at. But it's like it's a fine line to walk at times because there's times where, yeah, you do kind of have to address it. But like nowadays with RP, the way the organization is set up now, and we've got a ton of smart people that work for the company. I'm not doing anything that I'm not good at. It doesn't make any sense because like we've got other people that can do that way better than I can.
Yeah, it just seems like a waste of time if I'm going to do this project that takes me 4 hours when this guy has a PhD in that and he'll do it in an hour, then why put that hour into the strengths I have?
Totally. And actually, it's a really good question because Mike and I were always really good at that. Because Mike and I co-founded RP something like 12 years ago. And it was very clear that he was good at some things and I was good at others. Like he's not very detail oriented and maybe like responding back to people very quickly and being up on all that. Whereas I'm the complete opposite of that. Like if someone emails me, I was going to respond, right away and make sure things are followed up on and all this stuff. Like that's why I was in charge of, business operations, customer service, and all that stuff in the early days to stay on top of that. Whereas like he was designing the products, he was writing the books, and it was just like perfect partnership because our strengths and weaknesses meshed really well together.
Yeah. So then, speaking of Mike and that, and going to RP, what made the transition of I'm going to be an athletic director? Like, so you graduated, moved to New York, but what was like? Okay, I don't want to do the athletic directing now. I want to do this. What was the shift? What made that come
It was a
about?
little, yeah, it was a little bit earlier actually. So I met Mike my sophomore year at Michigan in the weight room, and he convinced me to do a powerlifting meet. I was like, all right, well, I'm not like competing in track anymore. I really like competing. I kind of missed it a little bit. Oh, this might be an interesting way to channel my athletic and competitive drive. Okay, I did it, really liked it. Started training with Mike full time, 4, 5, 6 times a week. He coached me through my first ever bodybuilding show. Just kind of knew that like that was what I really loved. Sports are cool, don't get me wrong. Like if I ended up working in sports, I'd still be very excited. But fitness, I realized then was really kind of like my passion and calling. And so that was that gradual shift away from, yeah, maybe not the athletic director thing. It's still kind of in the fitness sports field. They're interconnected. But nope, let's pivot this way a little bit. And here we are 17 years later.
Yeah, going for 17 years. What's kind of kept your drive from say you started that long ago and to keep building and making your company into what it is now, which is just incredible with the staff you have and the education everybody has and the products you offer are amazing. Like what's kept that drive to keep getting better and step up over and over again?
Yeah, well, one, thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. What has kept that drive up, man? I feel like it's sort of evolved over time. Where like when you're just starting out, it's like, oh man, I just want to kind of get our name out there and can we do this? Are we good enough? Can this really work with people? And then enough people start using it, and it's no longer like, does this work? But oh, okay, this is really something. Then how do we maximize our impact? And so it's kind of evolved to like where now it's more of a standpoint of now we're literally reaching millions of people a day from like the RP YouTube channel. How do we maximize the impact? How do we really help people? Is there a way that we can do research grants? Is there a way we can do RP scholarships? Is there a way that we can give back? So like that's kind of now the driving force. And maybe that's, part RP success related, also just part maturity and evolution over time. We're like probably beginning of RP because like I grew up with not very much money at all So when I started making like decent money, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like that was a little bit of the motivating drive, like probably in my, early to mid 20s. And then I feel like more recently now, so I'm 36 now, I'm gonna be 37 here in October. It's now shifted where it's like money's cool, don't get me wrong, right? Like money lets you do a lot of cool things and lots of freedom, but it's more of how do we really give back? How do we make a bigger impact? And I just feel like there's a lot tied in with just getting older and being more mature.
Yeah. So, and so throughout that process, I mean, there's got to be hard points in RP strength, like from starting it. There's when you hit a hard point. I know in your book you talk about learning from your mistakes and everything like that, like using a failure as a learning thing and everything like that. But when you hit a hard point, like what's your best thing? Is it just looking back and trying to evaluate what happened, or like what's your best way to go? Okay, not to get down on yourself and be like, shit, I'm fucking this up. What am I doing? What's your best way to kind of get back on track when something goes south there?
I feel like this is a little bit tied into the as you get older, hopefully more mature thing as well. Because yeah, in my early 20s, shit would go wrong and I would freak out. Ah, fuck, all hands on deck, just running around like a chicken with the head cut off, right? When something goes wrong. Well, that's not such a good approach, but you don't know any better, right? Like sometimes you have to hit those stumbling blocks and all this shit happens. You got to course correct and hopefully learn from it. But yeah, I did a talk down at Raise the Bar event in Dallas, and it was like kind of a fitness coach business thing. And it was really cool. And I essentially told everyone, I'm like, I've learned more in the last probably year to year and a half than I did like the first 8 years of running RP because we made a bunch of mistakes. And it was making those mistakes that really made us have to self-reflect and make some really hard choices and decisions that were not easy. But we came out on the other side and we're so much better off for it all now. And that to me, and it's like my mindset now is you just expect shit to happen. You don't even know what it is, right? But I just know in the coming weeks, something's gonna go wrong. That's just what happens. There's literally never a way around it. In life, in business, whatever. Shit happens. So do you come in with a mindset of everyone freaks out, run around like chicken with your head cut off? What happens when you do that? Other people start freaking out, get stressed out, whatever. Hey, if the boss is fucking losing his mind, what do you think other people are gonna do? So now it's just, and again, I'd like to think that it's just growth, maturity, whatever it is, right? Whatever we want to call it. Now I'm just like, oh, this is the next thing. Huh, okay. What do we do? All right, what's the most logical thing? All right, we should do X, Y, and Z. Okay, let's do that. And then you're not freaking out about it. And it's just like you're just very calm, cool, and collected about it. So that to me is, I think, where you really want to get to. It's not, is something going to go wrong? We know something's going to go. We don't know what exactly. Like, obviously, we do our best to avoid things going wrong, learn from past mistakes, correct them, but we know it's going to happen. So you just go in with a mindset of, oh, okay. Oh, this was the thing. All right, cool. What do we do now? Now, hopefully, it's not anything, catastrophic, but
Yeah.
like that, I don't know, man. That's just how I approach it now. And I started to realize that a couple months ago. And now I'll like laugh with some colleagues, and it's like, oh, okay, all right, this is the next thing. All right, because there's always something. So, okay, what do we do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. And when something goes wrong, would you say, kind of like I was talking about earlier, when something goes wrong, do you focus more on what did we do wrong or what did we do right in that situation? Like, because obviously most mistakes, it's like there was just a couple things wrong, but some of the things might have been executed really well. But is it what did we do wrong and let's fix that, or we did this right and we need to kind of go more to these strengths in?
Yeah, probably just making sure you're approaching it from a very calm perspective and not being overly emotional about it, and just looking at it like, hey, what happened? What went wrong here? Oh, okay. Well, it was, I don't know, lack of communication between two departments. Okay, cool. How do we fix that going forward? Can we get people on the phone, I don't know, ahead of time, get on weekly calls, or hey, like, I don't know, file the appropriate ticket or whatever, like just make sure there's better communication. All right, cool. Get people together, give some feedback. Hey, these things went great. Awesome. Great job. By the way, this wasn't so great. Do we think this is a good solution to fix that? Everyone says, oh, yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. Cool. All right. Now let's communicate about it. Great. Now the expectations are set. Okay, cool. All right. So this is what we're doing going forward. Now, hopefully it doesn't happen again. If it keeps happening, then it's, probably got to get people together and be like, all right, happened again. What do we do? All right. It might lead to some, tougher conversations, but a lot of times, those tougher conversations are needed in order to just get better. And then you have to go back and just approaching it with people that, hey, it's not something personal. But it's like, hey, guess what? You work for RP, you want RP to do well, right? Well, hopefully they say yes.
Yeah.
And they say yes. You're like, okay, cool. I also want RP to do well. All right, so here's the proposed solution. Are we cool with that? All right. And then it seems easy to say, obviously, when you get real people involved, and obviously there's emotion and biases and all that. Maybe a little tougher, but yeah, that's hopefully how we do it. It's hopefully how we go about fixing it.
When things like that happen or things go off, like what are kind of your coping? What are your ways to clear your head? Like for a lot of people, for me, one of the things for Pat, I need to get to the gym, clear my head, be able to have thoughts. Like you talk about doing some meditation, stuff like that. Is there certain things you turn to as like kind of like a coping mechanism of, okay, I need to clear my head and figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, I lift 6 days a week. Normally I lift in the morning, so I can kind of clear my schedule from something like 9 to 11. Not that it takes me the full 2 hours, but don't want to be rushed around too much after. And sometimes I don't get started till 9:30, whatever. Absolutely, fitness is going to be one. Like, it's just part of who I am. So if I'm not lifting, I might be a little, more agitated. I don't even know if I get too agitated if I don't work out, because it's just part of who I am, right? Like, what I'm saying here. It's just, what do you mean you're not going to work out? What? That doesn't make any sense. Like, no, of course
Yeah.
I am. I mean, probably that. We'll go for a walk with my dog, or sometimes my wife and I walk our dog, something like that. Sometimes we just go for a walk, the two of us. Our kids are a little bit older. They can, they're 12 and 10. They can sit at home for 20 minutes while we go for a walk, something like that. I don't necessarily like practice mindfulness or quote unquote meditation on a daily basis, but I feel like I spent a lot of time doing that, like during the COVID years and even after, that it helped me just become a bit more mindful and like just a bit more relaxed and sort of hopefully chilled out a little bit. So it's just kind of always there. And I'm always like reading about this stuff too, like literally just reading a book called Focus by Daniel Goleman. He's the guy that wrote Emotional Intelligence. And straight up, I did not have a high level of emotional intelligence. Like I would freak out. And I remember reading his original book, taking like the test in there and looking at my scores and being embarrassed. And I'm like, holy shit. So this goes back to the weaknesses thing. I realized that was a weakness, and that's a big weakness if you want to be a leader. And I'm like, I gotta fix this. I gotta correct this. So just started reading, and like as you read things, and you're always like, because if your focus is on something, you're always reading something about these topics, like it's always going to be on top of your mind. And so if you're reading a lot of books about how do you correct some of this stuff, well, it's really hard if you're doing that repeatedly, day in, week out. Like you're not going to not focus on those things because they're always top of mind. And so I don't know, some combination of all those is probably how I cope with things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that when, like you said, when you're reading those things, it's hard for it not to be in the back of your head of like, okay, well, I just had this happen. I read about this just 2 weeks ago in this book,
Yeah.
and so it's makes it easier to kind of be like, okay, and calm down and think about things a little better.
Yep.
So then you were talking about COVID there. So your COVID run was obviously not a very great experience. Of your wife gets breast cancer, and you were finishing writing this book, or had you just finished, or were you just starting writing that book?
So basically all that's happened and we were on like quarantine and lockdown for like a good probably 2 or 3 months. Again, this was early in COVID when no one really knew what was going on. And especially given my wife was in chemo and I had to be very cautious about, being around stuff because who knows, man, it was so early on. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and write this book because I had some ideas fleshed out in my mind. And it was sort of like the perfect quote unquote excuse because, hey, I'm going to be at home for 3 months. I'm not going anywhere. Like literally, we're not going anywhere. We're not doing anything. Groceries are being delivered. I got a home gym. Really the only place my wife is going is to the doctor's office. And so it's like, all right, well, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm not going to just sit back and, take punches. Let's make some good out of it. And so that was the motivation to write my book. And I really wanted to get it out before the end of 2020, just because it was COVID year. And we ended up releasing it. It launched in November of that year.
Okay. during that time, like that's a lot to process. Was it almost like overwhelming where you had to, or was it were you able to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna take care of the things I can control, like you talked about in these things, or was it like, was there some moments you were like, oh shit, like how do I manage all of this?
Yeah, there were definitely some moments of oh shit in there, for sure. It just it and with the way the timing had worked out, it's like, thank goodness I had started kind of doing all this reading and kind of trying to learn and grow just kind of as like a human. Because if I had not done that, I think I would have been a lot worse off and would not have been able to kind of lead my own family through it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I would have been a lot more overwhelmed in there. So it was almost like this, I don't want to say fortunate, but like fortunate timing because it was like a test. And I was like, all right, well, I've just learned all this stuff. Can I actually apply it? And can I actually do these things? Because yeah, I got some serious shit going on. My wife's got breast cancer. She's going through chemo. COVID just hit. My kids are now homeschooled, being quarantined. And it was just like, well, what are some things that we can actually, have control over? And so like my kids and I would train jujitsu every day during COVID for, 3, 4, whatever, 5 months. Again, it was just something that we could do. Now, was it fun for them? I don't know. Maybe at times, and other times not so fun. I'm sure it was not so nice on some occasions. We got together and we shaved my wife's head because she was going to lose her hair, so we couldn't control that. We're like, you know what? To her credit, she was like, I want to get ahead of this. She was like, I don't want my kids to see my hair falling out. I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's do it. I mean, I'm cool shaving my head. Doesn't bother me. My son was all about it. We just did this like little strip of my daughter's head just so she could be a part of it. And it's like, that's how you flip things around from being something really negative to, I mean, I'm always going to remember that night, like literally the rest of my entire life. We got pictures of it. Like, I mean, my kids were 8 and 6. I don't know how much they'll remember, 20 years from now, but I know my wife and I will always remember that. And that's how we got through it by, all right, we were dealt a shit hand. How do we make the best of it?
during that time, I mean, obviously with all that stuff, was communication just a huge thing with you and RP and then you and your wife? Is that one of the things that you had focused on before, or was it something that you learned? Like, because there obviously has to be a lot of communication while you're trying to run that business and then talking to your wife and dealing with that stuff. Like,
Yeah, I feel like the business was a little bit easier because the big thing that we did was we pivoted and had to create an at-home workout program, of which I think we were already going to do it at some point, and it was just like, oh, well, this is now urgent. Oh, this actually moves to priority number one, and we did it, and for the longest time, I think it was like our top digital selling product that year, and then like, people got back to the gyms, and no one really ever bought it again, but yeah, I do remember we were supposed to go to Wadapalooza that year in 2020, and I just remember telling a couple of my teammates, I'm like, I, I can't go. And my wife was just diagnosed with cancer. Like, I'm out. And that was the first event really in RP's history. Like, I had not been there,
yeah,
but it went well. And so that was cool to see. I'm like, huh, man, we got some good people at RP. Like, I don't have to be there. And things ran just as well if I had been there. So, oh, that's pretty cool to see. That's kind of something cool, I guess, reflect back on. I never actually really thought about that until you just asked. So that was a cool slide.
yeah. That would also be like kind of a really nice thing for your business. Be like, oh, shit can go down, and these guys can handle things. I don't have to micromanage everything. Like they can handle things if needs be.
Yeah, totally. I think I always had at least a somewhat intuitive understanding of that a little bit of like, I'm not a micromanager. I don't want to, I'm never going to be like that. Just want to get good people, get them on board and let them do their thing. And I think, I don't know, luckily somehow I realized that early on. I'm not sure how or why, but it just kind of always seemed intuitive to me to not do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So and then you were also talking about you reading all these books and everything like that. Is that something you've always been into, is doing this self-improvement and reading books, or was it something you got into a little later?
Definitely got into it later, man. Yeah, really one of my bigger regrets, although, when I say the word regret, it was almost I couldn't have done it in the early stages of RP because it was pedal to the metal, working round the clock, keeping our head above water. my wife and I both, 2015, 2016, because we were running all the customer service. We were doing, all this stuff. And we just had to do that to keep our head above water. And it was one of those things where you couldn't take a day off. If you took a day off, then you got further behind. And man, that's a really interesting rat race. So it's like, yeah, I'm disappointed that I wasn't reading, learning, and trying to improve myself, but I don't know how I could have. There literally wasn't time. It's just not something that I could have done because I would have just got further behind. But maybe I would have realized that that was the wrong way to go about it earlier and sooner, and would have brought people on earlier and sooner. Maybe you could probably make that argument. It's probably a pretty good argument. But I definitely was not always like that. And it wasn't until I remember the turning point. I had a hernia surgery and I couldn't work out. So I just had the only thing I could do was walk. Doctor's like, all right, for basically the next 4 weeks, no lifting, you can walk. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm walking. And so I started listening to audiobooks. And I remember the first one, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Because I remembered, like, I think my dad had a copy of the book growing up. Not that I really ever read it when I was younger. And sometimes, man, when it comes to books, like, you just got to be in the right frame of mind, the right mindset sometimes. And books just hit differently. Like, you could learn the same thing, but if it happens 5 years earlier, you don't really do anything with it because you're just not in that right mindset. But it clicked. And I was like, oh. Well, I want to learn, I want to read more now. Oh, okay. And I just started doing that. And it led to, because you read a book and normally they talk about other books. And then I'd start going in there and I'd start adding all these other books. My list of books that I want to read is, 500 books long all of a sudden. But I would go through and I would just keep reading them. And like sometimes, man, it's like getting in the flow state. Like I remember, I sometimes get this every now and again. When I'm reading a book, I can't put it down. And I only read nonfiction stuff. But it's like it really interests me. It excites me. I'm putting notes in my phone. I'm, doing a little folding down the pages and all that. I'm writing stuff down. And sort of immediately I'm always going, well, how can we like use this at our peer? How can I use this myself? Like, what can I actually do with it? And that was always a cool part for me because sometimes like I literally couldn't wait. So it happened at least a few times. Like I would wake up early on like a weekend completely on my own and like I would be excited to go read a book. And I'm like, huh, that's pretty interesting. That's probably
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think that, like you were talking about how it was always on the top of your mind. And the same thing with me is I didn't start reading any of these self-help books and everything like that until much later on. And once I started doing it and I realized that it did keep it in my mind, that I started doing a lot more positive things and taking
Yes.
away from the negative. Because I had a whole bunch of negative
Oh
coping,
yeah.
like anger issues and alcoholism and all that stuff that I never thought about approaching it through books and learning more. And then as I've done that through the past few years, I'm just like, my temperament's so much better just from doing those things and trying to execute them and taking notes on things like that.
Dude, 100%. If you'd probably asked my wife a couple years ago if I had anger issues, she absolutely would big yes. Oh yes. But it's never manifested itself at RP. I've always, I guess, when it comes to work side, always been able to be pretty calm, cool, and relaxed for the most part overall. But yeah, just it's embarrassing to honestly, really, to say that. Like, what do you mean? You couldn't control your emotions? You couldn't control your temper? Like, that's childish.
Yeah.
So it sucks to say it, but I feel like I've at least gotten better with it, the last year or so. And, bodybuilding probably doesn't help with that either when you're dieting down and you're super hungry all the time. Probably not the best thing if you're not the nicest person in the world. But yeah, really, dude, just like you said, man, really taking a proactive approach to being more positive and trying to think of, the better things versus the ugly side of whatever. And really tried to take and make a concerted effort into that this year. And in my opinion, it's really paying off.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, it is like, as I look back to some of the things I did with my temper and like that, I'm like, you were saying, I'm not embarrassed, but I'm like, I'm embarrassed by some of the things I did and the actions. I'm not when you're hangry. Hangry is different. Like you're saying, when you're cutting, like when I'd cut for competitions to lift,
Sure. Oh yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm like, I've been cutting for a week and I'm down 13 pounds. I'm like, I just need to fucking eat right now. So don't say anything to me until I get that food in me. But
Yeah.
I could never do the bodybuilding. I can't cut for that long. I'm like, that sounds rough. I like to eat. So
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I like to eat too, and I realize that it's very tough, man. It's very tough, and but there's a whole dark side of bodybuilding that, it's probably a whole nother conversation to have. But I've competed and just competed last summer and was fortunate enough to win my pro card. And like, I wouldn't recommend people compete. Like, if someone asked me, "Oh, do you really love it?" I'd be like, "No, you kidding me? Like, don't do this shit. I know I'm crazy. It's totally fine. Whatever."
Do you feel when you're getting ready for a competition or doing these competitions, is it more the self, like I want to be better than I was last time, or is it I want to win? Like which one's a driver? Are they both kind of up there? Like, no, I just want to look better than last time. I want to do better than last time, or is it no? I want to walk away holding the trophy, getting my pro card, doing that.
It's definitely both.
Yeah,
But here's the problem with a subjective sport like bodybuilding. The goal is to show up looking better than you did before. That is the primary objective. Because beyond that, yeah, of course I want to win. Of course. I don't really have control over that. I don't really have control over who else shows up or like, what does that judge think of me? I don't know. Because I literally won my class to win my pro card by 1 point. So had one judge flipped me and this other guy, I would probably be preparing for a bodybuilding show right now to go and try to win my pro card. So there's a lot of stuff out of your control. You just show up and try to look your best. That's goal number one. But hell yeah, I want to win. Hell yeah, I told myself every day that I was going to win. Did that make a difference as to, I don't know. Like, for example, a lot of people, when I have my little, like, whatever 10-second clip of when I'm up there on stage, damn, I look like I belonged up there. The confidence is exuding because I had practiced so much. So I knew going in that this is what it's all about. And I had done it and I had rehearsed it and practiced it so much that you didn't have to think about it. You don't even have time to think about it. I remember that. They just kind of like rush you up there and they're like, "Hey, you're next." And I'm like, "Oh shit, okay, all right." And it's just because I practiced it so much and boom, it just all clicked. And I've shown the video to people and I just remember a lot of the feedback was like, "Oh man, you look like so happy, you look so confident up there." And I was like, I hope so.
yeah. It was more instinctual that you trained. You're like, I've trained so hard and done this. I'm ready.
I'm not scared. I'm not nervous. That and maybe, luckily, you didn't have time to think about it because I didn't have time to think about it. Just all of a sudden, I was up there. I was like trying to do some push-ups and pump up a little bit backstage, and then all of a sudden, like you're in the lineup, and they're like, "Nope, you can't do any of that stuff." Oh, hey, by the way, you're next. All right, here we go.
Yeah. I think that that's almost a bonus where you said you don't have time to think about it. Because if I look back to athletics that I did, like times that I would get riled up and get like try to pump myself up, I almost would play worse sometimes.
Yeah,
Like with football, I'd get so mentally wound up and like, and everything like that I'd get out there and I'd make stupid mistakes that I didn't know. But then when it came to wrestling, like I'm getting ready for a region championship match and I'm taking a nap, and my coach is like, "Hey, you got to warm up," and I'm like, "Oh yeah," and then I just go out and wrestle great because I just wasn't overthinking it and knew I was prepared. Is that
yeah,
a
yeah.
feeling you
No,
feel?
I think there's a lot to that. So I've got a really great recent example where my daughter's 10, she's playing softball, and she had a couple game streak where she didn't do so well hitting, and I'm like trying to give her pointers and hey, do this and do this and do this and do this, and didn't help. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try just shutting the hell up. She gets up there, she just smacks away. All right. So lesson learned for old dad over here. Hey, shut up. Don't, because as soon as you get in their head, now they're overthinking. Sports, man, it's quick, it's fast, right? And you just got to do these things. And you don't have time to think. You just got to practice so much that boom, you get out there, you don't think about it. It's just automatic. And like that's what you have to do. But do you have those reps in ahead of time? Because like you said, you start overthinking it. Now, a split-second delay, boom, guy blows by you. It's a touchdown. Like that's the difference between winning or losing. So you got to put in the reps to be prepared ahead of time. And then once you are, should just be second nature. Don't overthink it at the last minute.
Yeah, just like you talked about it. I've heard what you say this podcast and stuff, and I've said it of trusting the process of getting there. And if you've trusted your process and know you put in the work and done that dedication, there's like now that you're in it, hopefully it just flows because you've done it and you're ready for all that.
Totally. Actually, so one other good example is so a talk that I did at Raise the Bar. So I'd never talked about like a business topic before. And there's like 150 people there in person. But dude, I had repped it in my head so many times that it was great. They had an amazing setup where I could see the slides and I kind of knew like what was coming next. I didn't even need to see them. So I knew exactly what was coming next because I had gone through it so many times in my head. And so like, yeah, I'm nervous to go public speak on a topic I've never talked about before. But then when I got up there and got going, it was easy because I had so many reps in my head. You know, I'd gone through that whole entire freaking thing so many times that, and man, it was like magic up there. And I just like I wasn't nervous at all. I was just like, I love this. Like this is great. But again, I had done so many reps. Thing that people don't do is sometimes they don't put in that work ahead of time. Yeah, you're gonna be nervous. You know, it's like, someone invited me to speak on quantum physics. I'd be scared out of my mind because I don't know a damn thing about it. But I know a lot about this subject and I'm practiced and I'm rehearsed. So it's like the transitions between slides is like I was seamlessly able to move from one to the next because I knew exactly what was coming. I had basically, timed it all in my head where boom, 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 boom. It's great. Practice is great.
When you do things like that, do you have a process of getting ready for something? Is it like, do you do note cards? Or you just kind of do brain repetitions, or is it?
Here's what I did. So, basically got all my slides ready. Sometimes it makes a little tweaks or something like that. I actually got together with a couple of folks that I knew and ran through like a sample. I did it live in front of two guys that I knew, and they gave me some feedback. Went back to the drawing board, made some little changes, made some notes, and then what I would do is I would just print out the PowerPoint slides, 3 to a page, and I would make little notes, just like, all right, cool. So here's this slide because you don't want a ton of text on slides when you're presenting, right? Because then people read it, but it's like the picture, the image is just there to serve as your reminder so you know what to talk about. So I would just write like the couple little notes on that slide. Like, yes, okay, this is what I'm gonna talk about, and then this, and then this. And like you just do that. And then I would just go through them. And so I was on the flight, whatever, out to Vegas and then back and then down to Dallas or whatever. Like I was going through all those slides. And, okay, here's what I'm doing. That's how I operate. I don't know if that's best for everyone, but that seemed to work pretty good for myself.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about your RP or anything like that, so where are you trying to go with it now? Is it just kind of a goal of, is there bigger goals you have? Because I mean, it's already a massive company and you guys do, like I said, a lot of great work, but do you have like admirations you want to get to, or they're just kind of like, let's just keep making the best products that we can, the best training, and
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, so the big thing is just trying to really stay focused on a couple big things like each year. So we've got a big app update coming out for Diet App where we're going to rework some things and like that's going to be cool. And then we've got so Hypertrophy app has been out for almost a year now. Later this month will be 1 year when we launched it. Is getting that to an official 1.0 state, so getting it out of beta. And those are like the two big initiatives that we're trying to knock out this year. And then we'll kind of reassess and all right, what are the next couple things after that? My original goal was to be able to help 1 million people with RP. The YouTube channel is literally reaching millions per day,
yeah.
so it's really cool to see. So it's just now like how do we amplify that? Are there other ways that we can give back and help people? And because lots of people are watching the channel and content, all that. That's great. That's amazing. That's making a big impact. But now, how do we take that? How do we do even a little bit more? Like other ways we can give back and help people as well. That's where my head's kind of at now is to, but what are those next steps? Like what's that kind of next level that we can get to?
And then you were talking about earlier that when you first started and like that, and in those first few years that it was, rough, and that you and your wife were doing it together, that she was helping with stuff and like that. Do you think it would have been a lot harder without that support? Like it sounds like your wife has been very supportive of it. Like, do you think without support like that, would you have been able to make it? Or like, is there advice for somebody if they're not getting that support? Or
Yeah. So that's really interesting point, and I've thought about that a lot. So if you're getting started on your own, it's really, really hard. You have to have a team. So early on, the team was myself, Mike, and my wife, and I would not be anywhere without those two. Nowhere close. I'd probably be a coach myself, coaching, 100 people or something like that, which, hey, that's dope. That's awesome, right? I wouldn't have been necessarily disappointed with that because that's where I thought I was gonna go with, getting into fitness. But yeah, man, it takes because one person has lots of weaknesses, but then you partner up with someone else that has different strengths than you do. And so you get someone else in and they've got different strengths. Now, collectively, you are a lot better off than you are by yourself. And so that's kind of the tricky part for like solopreneurs when they're trying to get started. Like you have to do everything. Obviously, inevitably, things that you're not going to be very good at. If you partner with somebody does the things you suck at pretty well, right? Like there's probably more to be gained from that. Um, so yeah, no, I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am without those two for sure.
And when you're talking about getting other people in, one of the businessmen here in the valley that I'm from, he's highly successful. When I talked to him, I mean, this was 20 years ago when I was a kid, and I was like, what did you do to make your company so big? He goes, hire people smarter than you and that are better at your weaknesses. And I was like, that's it. He goes, that's it. That's all I did. I hired a lot of smarter people than me. And I'm like, that's all right. I guess that's a good piece of advice to follow.
Yeah, they say if you're ever the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. It's never been an issue for me because I've probably never been the smartest person in the room, especially at RPs. So probably something to that.
And when you're doing programming stuff like that, what's your favorite kind of? Do you like to train like high caliber athletes? Was that your kind of favorite thing to do, or is it like no? I like to see results of somebody who's really been struggling and hasn't been able to cut that weight and can get them down. Would be your favorite part?
It seems like working with athletes would be the coolest part. It seems that way until you realize that a lot of those guys don't give a shit and they skate by on genetics. And then you can't implement stuff with them because they don't give a shit or they're not paying attention or they don't care, right? They just, whatever, they just kind of do their own thing and they're great in spite of it. So, man, give me the hard ass worker that wants it 100 out of 100 times. I would much prefer to work with someone like that than I would like some, entitled athlete who's just been skating by on genetics and luck.
Plus, I think sometimes they think they know better. They're like, I've made it this far. Like, I don't know if I need to fully
Yeah.
do
Give me a
this.
hard worker and someone who's coachable. I'll take them every single time.
I think coachability is the best because I've coached like athletes in like little kids, like fifth grade, sixth grade,
Mhm.
football and basketball, and it's like sometimes you get a really talented kid that's just genetic, but he just doesn't listen. It doesn't work. He's just kind of like you said, they coast. But when you get those coachable kids, they'll just want to drive and to keep going and listen to what you say. I'm like, that's a way better feeling is when you see this kid, and then when you see him succeed after that, of him putting in the work and seeing him get that from it.
Yeah, I used to volunteer coach, and my son's, he's into jujitsu, and so I would volunteer coach it because I was doing jujitsu at the time. I could easily see it. Like I try to give a kid instruction. If they're not gonna listen to me, I'm like, okay. I know that sounds terrible to say. I kind of like just write that person off. I'm like, well, all right, you don't want to listen. Guess what? I'm going to give a little more time and attention to this kid because he's eating it all up, and then he just has a good attitude about it. And I tell him what to do, he does it, and guess what? Like he gets it, that much sooner. And then he's got some of those kids that are, I don't know. That's probably also why I'm not meant to be a coach because maybe that's the wrong attitude to have. Like, yeah, you should try to, but I don't know, man. You could quickly see it, and you're like, okay, all right. I don't know what to do with that kid because he doesn't want to listen, wants to do his own thing. It's like, all right, well, I'm only a volunteer coach, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to get that motivation to be like, well, to put like get him back in line or figure out what's going to work for him. It's like if I'm volunteering and I'm only here for a season, there's not a lot of reason for me to put effort in to make you listen. You're obviously not going to do it.
Yeah, it's like just listen. What an easy thing to do, right? Like you're being coached by someone. All right, cool. Just listen to what they have to say. Coachability, yeah, for sure, man. It's a talent. Maybe not a talent, but I don't know. It's a skill. How about that? And it's a pretty
Yeah.
easy one to learn, but for a lot of reasons, people don't want to do it.
especially the most gifted. I think that's the hardest part is those really gifted kids that just they have that talent, and they have the speed, and they just almost end up wasting it because they just didn't listen. They weren't coachable. You see it all the time in NFL and things like that. These great athletes that just fall off because they're not coachable. They don't want to listen and they don't want to follow the rules. But
It's probably my biggest pet peeve. Could arguably be my biggest pet peeve in life is wasted potential because of something as simple as attitude. It's like, are you kidding me? Because I never had it. Like, oh man, I wish I would have been blessed with like some amazing athletic ability. Because if I could have had that and my sort of, internal workings up here, I could have been a heck of a lot better. But I don't know. Maybe if I would have had better genetics, maybe I wouldn't have, had to work so hard. So I don't know. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. I don't know.
yeah, and I mean, a lot of people would look at you and they wouldn't think that. They wouldn't think that guy got there strictly by working. I mean, obviously you said you started working out when you were 13 and then you just kept building that. And it's like some people might look and go, that guy's just a genetic freak. But it's like, no, you don't know the hours you've had to put in, the science you've had to go through, and learning all this stuff to get to the point you're at.
Yeah, it's that proverbial like the iceberg poster, right? You really only see the tip of it. And I think social media is good and bad, of course, but you only see the tip of it and you don't see everything that goes beneath it. Yeah, it is easy to fall victim to that and be like, oh, well, like, they just always were like that, or, whatever. Their parents were X, Y, and Z or whatever. And so you don't see all the hard work that goes into it because you just see kind of the finished product. Well, that's not the truth, man. That's like 5% of the truth. There's whole other 95% that is not being shown that probably should be shown.
So when we're talking about that, we'll just go like if you had to give advice either to 18-year-old you or younger kids, like what would be your best advice to you or kids in general, like going forward, try this or learn this or
Yeah, try to learn to master your emotions. Because if you can be the person that doesn't panic when stuff goes wrong, shit hits the fan, there's a lot to learn from that. Because you're going to be more patient. You're probably going to have a longer term time horizon because you have impulse control. You understand impulsivity and you're less likely to make the stupid decisions, to do the dumb, stupid things, whatever they are, to, waste your money, to whatever. Impulse control. If you can get that, and if you can master it at an earlier age, because obviously the earlier you get started, right? Let's take the example of personal finances. The earlier you can get started and start saving and investing money for the long term, you're gonna be so much better off.
Yeah.
Even if it's small amounts. So just the ability to master that impulse control. It's just honestly, it's a superpower.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see how that would be something that a lot of kids and a lot of people that I didn't learn for a long time. And I think a lot of people, you still look at grown men that still don't do it. They didn't master those impulses and like that. You can see it come out of them and watch them self-destruct from.
Absolutely, man. I mean, there's people that I know that run businesses that kind of will admit to that, to like being kind of emotional and hot-headed. And I think to myself, okay, well, you're aware of it. Why don't you do something about it?
Yeah.
It seems like a no-brainer, but apparently not.
No. And you were saying that social media is good and bad. You were talking about that. What would you say, like, are you saying that social media, is there things that need to be worked on, or is it just like us as a community and society need to use it differently?
Oh, so I mean, it's just a tool, right? And you can use tools. I mean, you could use a hammer to build stuff, or you could use a hammer to go attack somebody, right? Well, it's kind of up to the person to use it for good or bad. So there's a ton of good stuff. I mean, look at all the information that you can go access on social media, see positive and inspiring stories of people and all this stuff. So there's just a ton of great stuff. But you can also choose to use it really horrendously. And you can focus on all the negative stuff, people saying things about you, focusing on what other people have, what you don't have, etc. It's just like, well, that's a pretty easy way to lead to like this downward spiral where it's probably not going to be very useful for you. It's probably only going to be a net negative to you. But it's like, yeah, can you master that impulse control? Can you be in control of your emotions? Because if you can you may, if you see something you don't like online, you can just ignore it, move on, and be like, hey, well, actually, I'm just here to, check out these people that I look up to, that I admire. And then you'll just be like, oh, that's really awesome. I'm inspired by that. I'm motivated by that. I want to go and try to replicate that. I don't know how, but hey, maybe I'll DM them. And, chances are like people, I think, anyways, I could be totally wrong on this, are a lot more friendly and accessible than you think.
Yep.
Yeah, if you just kind of take the chance to reach out to them. Um, but some people don't want to do that, and some people are kind of all up in their head and got all sorts of negativity biases and just really want to do a lot of that. And that's a good way to not get any value out of social media.
Yeah. And also, I think that there's just some negative, and there's also just false information out there on social media. Whereas, like, when you look at some people that are posting stuff about workout, things like that are doing bro stuff that's just completely false. It's like, well, maybe if you learn something from social media, research it a little bit before you decide to reenact it. Kind of.
Totally. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great point. And yeah, I wasn't even thinking in that terms of that perspective. But yeah, I feel like on the training and nutrition side, I feel like the bad nutrition information is more dangerous than like bad training information. Because someone might be like, this is the only exercise to grow your quads, and it's whatever it is. Let's say it's hack squats. You're like, okay, that's wrong, of course, fundamentally for the number of reasons, but it's not the worst advice in the world. Like that's the thing with fitness. And I remember seeing this in New York and having debates with like some of my clients back in the day when I was a personal trainer and trying to explain to them that like there are better ways to do it. Because they would always be like, well, at least they're doing something, right? Like maybe they're just in there doing the battle ropes. And it was like this client who literally knew nothing and he charged ridiculous prices and he would have them stand on the Bosu ball and do all sorts of like weird shit. And I'm like, I know that's fundamentally wrong, but their counter argument would be, well, it's better than doing nothing. So, okay, yes, technically, I suppose. But then I always wanted to retort to them, and I literally just thought about this the other day. I'm like, all right, let's say they're into finance. And we're like, all right, well, how do you grow your money? And, ask them, right? Like a fitness professional, someone who works on Wall Street. And they'd be like, oh, yeah. And they would go into this elaborate way that you can do it. And I could be like, oh, well, like, I just put my money in a savings account in the bank. I'm making some money. Like that would be the analogy, right? And they would easily see how that's a stupid fucking thing to do.
Yep.
And I'd be like, oh, so you mean does that then apply to maybe fitness? That's a stupid fucking thing to do. And like there are better ways to do it. Because you have to put things in people's perspectives and frame of minds as to what they know best. And if you can relate to that, well, they might go, oh, okay, yeah, you are right. There probably are better ways to do it. So the nutrition stuff just scares me a little bit more because people get so dogmatic about stuff, and it's like, you can't eat a fucking apple. And you're like, what? What kind of stupid advice is that? Like, we know eating lots of fruits and veggies is like the surest way to be more healthy. What the fuck are you talking about? And my buddy just sent me a reel the other day where, it was like a clip of, I forget who it is, but he's like pretty well known, like low carb zealot. And he was saying something like, well, like, the people that only ate oatmeal for breakfast, ended up eating way more. And it's like, yes, that is true. And I was like, well, there's a variety of reasons for that. Okay, well, you eat tasty foods, you generally want more tasty foods. Okay. Because it was like the group that only ate eggs, right, and didn't have carbs. And it's like, well, they didn't eat more because they had carbs per se, even though calories were controlled, was because they just weren't making good choices. And so, like, people can really steer people down some weird rabbit holes and that when it comes to nutrition.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of stuff out there that when you see it, I'm just kind of like, who came
Yeah,
up with this? But and
it's
it's
insane.
people that comment and follow, and I'm just like, okay, did you look into this at all? But then some people just like, well, he looks like that. Well, it
Not
makes
at all.
sense.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and then so we were talking about social media. I guess we're just going to talk about kind of society. Like if you were saying that the U.S. right now, if we're lacking something, is it like compassion, or is there something that you think right now America could really use, like that we need that we're lacking?
Mhm. Man, I think if we could, I don't know, probably just get people more active in general, that'd probably just be a huge net boost to society overall. Again, there's so much nuance to that. I have no idea how we actually go about doing that, because different people live in different environments, and it's not so easy for other folks. So, but I just know if we could get people working out more, it doesn't even really have to be working out. It could literally just be more physically active. So you're not sitting around as much, you're not maybe eating as much junk food. If we could just maybe do that, because like you know how it is when you're working out, you just feel better, better mindset. You just feel better. Man, if you feel better, you're probably nicer to people. This is on average, right? We all know all sorts of fitness people who are just giant dicks. So I don't mean this is the total rule. There are exceptions, of course, but just are there some little things that we can do to get people moving in the right direction?
And I noticed that, like, obviously, if I'm not working out and everything like that, like my mental health starts to dip. And like, would you say there's huge correspondence in mental health and physical health and vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think there's a lot of good, solid evidence to support that. Where if you're working out, you're just going to feel better. Whether it's because like you know that the things you are doing are working to improve your life and your health and all that, or if it's just like kind of from a more neurochemical standpoint of I don't know, you get more dopamine or more endorphins are being released when you're exercising, you just kind of feel better overall. But there's probably just a variety of reasons for it. But you know, 30 years ago, I could see people questioning like, "Oh, well, is working out really good for you?" Like we pretty much know, like that's been answered and pretty definitively like you should be working out. And it's hard, so not everyone does it, but if you work out, you're going to feel better. And if you feel better, you're probably just going to be in a better mood by and large.
No. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that more. And then you were talking about reading all your books and everything like that and doing those. What do you think are the three best books that you would recommend that people
Any,
read or even look at? Or even, I mean, it doesn't have to be three, but like top books that you like, these are must read books.
yeah, I've
We'll
got a
obviously put
handful. I've got,
we'll put Fit for Success on there, obviously. And
yeah, I've got
then
a handful, man. I've got a handful behind me. So usually I start with the slight edge because I think that's a really cool concept. You just do the little things day in, day out. And if you just keep doing them, you're going to lead to like the compound effect, multiplier effect over time. That's a really good one. Just a couple other books that I have up there, man. I've got I see The Energy Bus. It's a good one by John Gordon. I've got Grit. I've got Mindset by Carol Dweck. I've got Influence up there. I've got Extreme Ownership. I've got How to Win Friends and Influence People. Man's Search for Meaning. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Slight Edge. I've got my book. I've got Flourish by Martin Seligman, who's a positive psychologist at UPenn. Okay, go read those, man. If someone were to read those books and it didn't change their life, I would be absolutely shocked by it.
yeah, that would be shocking. Those are all some great books. I've read most of them, some of them I haven't. But
Yeah, yeah,
seeing
yeah.
those Michigan things, this is off topic, but what do you think about Harbaugh leaving? Is that a little rough or
Obviously, I wish he would have stayed because he's just an amazing football coach. And man, the he's a very great football coach. But I think the more I've kind of learned and heard about him, he's really a great leader. Because you look at the culture that they had built, and again, you go back to you learn from your mistakes and lessons. He was almost fired after the COVID year.
yeah?
So that probably led to some self-reflection for him, which led to a little bit of change in leadership from their, top players. Because before their top players were more me, 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 me. And then you get guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Blake Corum, JJ McCarthy in there, and they're all about the team. Guess what happens? They go, 41-3 over the last 3 years, three outright Big Ten titles, first time it's ever happened in the history of the Big Ten, three straight playoff appearances, national championship, 15-0. I went to 3 games during that run. I went to an early on game, a night game, actually, first ever night game at Michigan State. I went to the Big Ten championship game. I took my daughter. Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
She was 9 at the time. Like, I hope 20 years from now she still remembers that because I know I will. It is
Yeah.
awesome. Then I went to the national championship game, which I will never forget as well because it was
Oh, I
probably
bet.
outside of like major life events in my own life, like one of the coolest experiences I've ever been a part of. And I'm a 36-year-old man and literally was like couldn't speak after halftime. I was yelling so loud.
No.
And Here's the awesome thing about sports. I'm a very introverted person. I'm hugging random people. I'm giving high fives, fist bumps. Dude, there's these two guys behind me. I have no idea who they are. We were like best friends, man. I was sitting next to my sister. I was able to, take my sister. That was cool. But dude, these guys behind me, I was like, we're like best friends. I have no idea who they are now, but it didn't matter, man. It's like we had that common bond. We were Michigan fans. It's like, isn't that so cool about sports? Like you'd go to something like that. It doesn't even matter. Who knows what their political thoughts were? Who knows about, XYZ? It doesn't matter. None of that shit matters. All that matters is, hey, you're a Michigan fan. So am I. We're gonna like each other for these next 3, 4 hours. It doesn't really matter. It's just like the coolest stuff in the world to think about.
No, it's a really cool thing to see that humanity. People like, we're on the same team all of a sudden. Like we cheer for this. It's like same thing. I'm kind of when I go to the gym, I put my headphones in. I don't really talk to people. People are sometimes like, I really thought you were an asshole, and I'm like, no, I just. But then when you go into an environment like that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, and you just some random person becomes your best friend for that next 3 hours of the game.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. Man. So yeah, Harbaugh won a national championship, man. He literally took Michigan to the promised land. So I got no issues with him leaving.
So, but it is fun to watch how the leadership that he had and to see how much that can affect, like getting a team's mindset. To be able to do that is a talent that not many people have, especially with young athletes like that. It's hard to bring together a bunch of 19, 20, 21 year olds and fully put them together as a team. That's just something to
Oh
look
yeah,
up to, I feel like.
absolutely, man. Especially now in today's age of the NIL stuff, where people are just leaving left and right, and they'll abandon you at the sign of I don't know, a couple $1,000s more, which I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's a hard thing to think about and to talk about. And I don't know a better way. It's like they deserve money, but at the same time, it's a hard thing to, how do you monitor? How do you take care
They
of this?
do totally deserve money, but hey, maybe let's cap it at like you get one free transfer. Beyond that, you got to sit a little bit. Because I mean, there's literally a guy that after Michigan won the national championship transferred out. I think the latest rumor was he probably went and got paid by this other school, SEC school, and he might transfer back. Like, did he keep all that money he got from the other school?
Yeah.
I mean, good for him, I guess, but like, what? How do you welcome him back from a culture standpoint? Like, what's that showing other players? Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it, man. I feel like you got to put some rules and limitations around it. We're like, hey, if you want to transfer, no worries at all. You totally can. You should be free to get one free transfer across the board for anyone. Now, maybe if your coach leaves, then you get another opportunity where you can re-enter the transfer portal. But this shit where they can do it like 10 times,
Yeah.
it's legit free agency.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it's a sustainable model.
Yeah. And it's almost a less controlled free agency. Like it's just kind of like they can just do, it seems pretty reckless. They just kind of do whatever they want.
Totally. I would propose one free transfer. If your coach leaves, you can have another one. But beyond that, you can't transfer every semester. Because right now you could transfer every semester. It's wild.
Yeah. It's crazy. So we've been going for a while now. I guess we'll just kind of, if we'll wrap up with, if somebody could take one thing from this whole interview, what do you think the best thing to take?
I would say impulse control. Learn that, master that. Think about it all the time. Read books on how to improve it. Watch podcasts on how to improve it. Watch videos. Think about it a lot. Practice it a lot. Do that, and you're going to be so much better off because it's a universal trait for success.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I'd just like to say, appreciate you coming on and spending some time. And I appreciate all the stuff you do with RP Strength. All that stuff is great material. And the company you built with the education and everything like that they have is amazing. And anybody who's looking to advance things should definitely go to your stuff. Where can they find you while they get out there?
Yeah. Main spot's probably at nick.shaw.rp on Instagram. So, give a follow there. RP Strength on Instagram as well is another great spot. And then go check out the RP YouTube channel. So it's Renaissance Periodization. If you search Dr. Mike and anything to do with like bodybuilding or training, you're going to see it pop up right away. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, man. There's just so much great free information on there that you could literally get a whole college education for that costs you nothing.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole you can get sucked into that you can, because I can watch those videos for hours. I'm just like, oh, okay, I've learned enough today. Let's
Yeah,
go
yeah,
execute
yeah.
it.
Totally. When I'm driving to the gym, when I do go to the gym and train, when I'm not training here at home, yeah, totally. I usually always have the RP YouTube channel on, and usually getting a laugh out of it, man. So it's good.
Anything else you want to say to people, or
No, man, go check out the YouTube channel. Enjoy all the free content. If you do that, we got some cool apps that you can see through the videos and whatnot. You can click on those, check them out. But yeah, no, come enjoy all the free content. You'll be better off, and it's what we do.
great? All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
All right, yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yep.